important topics. And we thought that this would be just a wonderful opportunity to get to talk about some really important areas of life that have been affecting all of us in the United States, many of us around the world. We're kind of, I don't know if we want to call it in the middle of, I don't know, depending on whose estimates you're thinking about. We're in a pandemic, a global pandemic. COVID-19 has affected our lives in really, really extraordinary ways. And as you know, we've been in the midst of some real civil unrest that I think is necessary, but it is unrest nonetheless. And it is causing a lot of anxiety and stress, and is affecting the mental health of all of us. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about some of these questions. And one of the things that we're seeing is that in these major areas of relationships, however we want to define that, work-life balance and parenting, our mental health is really being, stressed. And I want to know how you're thinking about these issues, and what have you been thinking about these days?
So first of all, I am super excited to be a part of this conversation, especially with you. For a long part of my life, whenever I was going to do something new or something brave, or what I felt was the next level, somehow Villanova was always connected to it. And the people I've met at Villanova, including yourself. So this is like a win-win-win, right? So being able to talk about my work and the things that are going on, but to be able to do it with you and to do it connected with Villanova is super special. And so, what you shared is just is really true. And I see it in my work as a therapist, just trying to help people. That who would have thought 2020 would have just brought so many things for people? I mean, I've already heard people saying like they're just going to erase 2020 from their memories when they look back, right? There's like 2018, 2019, 2021, like they're just going to skip over 2020. And
don't you remember, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you remember, like, as we were coming out of 2019 and we were going into 2020, everybody had all of these cute sayings.
Yeah.
Clear vision in 2020, 2020 vision. It was going to be the next decade. And it's like, it hit us like gangbusters. So
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but you're right. You're right. Like we had a lot of excitement, which talks about like how our thoughts and perceptions can impact what we do and what we don't do, right? So we had a lot of beliefs and hopes for 2020. People were going to change their habits. They're going to do new things. Like you said, the vision was going to be clear. And then 2020 hit us with a knockout punch, right? Multiple times. And I think the pandemic, it was one of those things that I think for a lot of people, especially in the US, was like, we see it, we hear it, but this belief that maybe it won't really impact us as much. And some of that, I think, internally is some of our own struggles around what do we think we can overcome or what do we think won't affect us. And it hit us, and it hit us hard. And I think I've seen so many people, one of the things I've been saying is that if you don't think that you have anxiety or that you struggle with anxiety, you know it now. Right? That this pandemic period has allowed people to realize, oh, that's what they mean by anxiety. That worry, that fear, that concern, that like, should I do this? Should I do that? And if you've already been experiencing anxiety, it is through the roof. I've heard and talked with people that have been so overwhelmed by everything that they are paralyzed. They are unable to necessarily get out of bed or really function because the worry is so heavy and so thick for them. And so there's this combination between people who are like, oh, yeah, all right, this is great. I get some time off, or I get a new way of living, to I'm so worried about life. And to be honest, death, right? That's what it brings up for a lot of us. That in my studies, there's this thing called death anxiety. And I never heard of it before I was in graduate school. But it made so much sense to me that there's a way that we all at some point in our life have some worry, have some anxiety about life and death, about mortality.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic, along with just inconvenience, is pushing that right there in people's face of what is life, what is death, what is quality of life, what
Mm-hmm.
is income, what is stability, all these things that we might have concern about. And then you also mentioned the civil unrest. I also agree that that's another thing, right? That has been there, right? Has been around for, unfortunately, hundreds of years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we've seen it in multiple decades, in multiple ways, in multiple situations. But in the past 6 or 7 years, not including Trayvon, which is even longer than that, just in the
Right.
past 6 or 7 years, we've seen more Black men and women that have died or have experienced injustice or racism, and then the protests that have come out of that, the movements that have come out of that, the civil unrest, to once again say maybe the way that we're living, maybe the way that we think is not okay, and that change needs to happen. And I'm seeing a lot of people, a lot of clients wrestle with that in their family, regardless of their race, wrestle
Yeah.
with what they say, with how they communicate, with how they want to live. So it's a lot that people are experiencing right now, and I
I
think everybody needs someone to talk to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think you just hit on something really important. As you were talking about this death anxiety, it made me think about even, I'm a woman of faith. I know you're a man of faith.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
even with our faith and with prayer and, because so many things happened as a result of the pandemic. Our churches got shut down, people's synagogues and their mosques, so they don't have the physical
Yeah.
proximity to their faith communities. And so folks are doing everything online, and they're doing, even worshiping. But this question about this anxiety, and then when it's coupled with the civil unrest, what I've been experiencing is yeah, there is this sort of in the back of my mind thinking about, what if I contract the virus, or what if one of my family members contracts the virus? But also then there's this kind of seething, boiling anger
Yeah.
and frustration, right? That, I'm going to be completely transparent. It's affected me, right? It's affected my, like my sort of resting place is heightened.
Mhm.
My sleep is affected. I'm not necessarily up all night, but it's hard to shut your brain off, right? Some of that is that kind of work-life balance that we're going to get into, being at home. But I think you're right. There's so much, and you do have to find people to talk to. But before we sort of move on to another question that I have, I want to stay on this issue about finding somebody to talk to. What's your recommendation even for finding a mental health professional right now? Because you can't go into anybody's office.
Yeah, you said so many, amazing things. And right, there is a way that you can't necessarily go in anyone's office, and that's not good for the therapist or for you,
That's
right?
right.
Because everybody's going to be worried about
That's
something,
right.
and you're not going to be focused. Uh, but that's also been one of the gifts during this time, that I've been able to see clients virtually, right? We're able to have this conversation virtually. That there's a way that sometimes people say, I don't know if that's going to work, but I still feel people's pain. I can still feel the emotions people are going through, even through the screen. And I think more and more clients have become open to that. I think the virtual therapy and even some of the rules that made it difficult have opened up. A lot of states have made it feasible for people to have that type of connection. And even when you mentioned about faith, and as you shared, that my faith has been instrumental in my life and has
Mhm.
helped me and guided me, and it's allowed me to really say in this time, what is my faith, right? And can I practice that on my own? But it's also, just the other day, I got invited to a mass. And the person, the priest that was conducting the mass was in at the Vatican, right? Like, so like I'm like participating in this mass virtually, right,
Yeah.
from the Vatican, and there's this ability to now connect and have experiences. I've been able to visit churches from across the country, and
Yes.
so there's opportunities to get support that might not necessarily be within a 5 to 20 minute drive-in range or a 30-minute commute, but that you can get those resources, you can get help, you can seek a spiritual guide, and maybe somebody you've looked up to for a long time. You might be able to reach out or even listen to them. You could travel to the Vatican like I did in that
Yeah.
mass, or you can reach out to a therapist, and many of us are open to it, and you get to experience it. And what I've seen for people is that when they try it, they realize, you know what, this is actually pretty good. I feel better. I'm glad, because a lot of people are experiencing what you're saying, of feeling like there's just so much. And
Hmm.
on the civil unrest part, I didn't get to yet, is this the impact of racial trauma, right? That
Yes.
that
Yes.
especially for people of color, this thought of uh, that it is traumatic. Having to
Yes.
talk about it, being angry, being numb, being overwhelmed, being frustrated, saying, "Ah, here we go again." All
Yes.
those things create emotional and physical symptoms. And insomnia is one of those things, right?
Yes.
Irritability, all those things. Anger is a part of that. And so, what I've recognized in my own life, and just talking to so many people of all different backgrounds, is that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to talk. We need to find those places that allow us to recharge and to figure out what's important to us, because 2020 is making us figure out what's important to you.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, all of the things that you're talking about with the civil unrest and about this question of trauma, I have written a piece about that, and I have specifically written a piece about sort of trauma on Black professionals,
Mm,
Black people in general, right? But also on Black professionals, what it means to be in predominantly white spaces and to have to work through this kind of trauma. Um, I think you're exactly like you've hit the nail on the head. I'm also wondering, even sort of connecting what you were just saying about being able to do virtual therapy. I'm wondering, do you think that insurance companies will continue even after the pandemic? Like, do you think that we've sort of opened Pandora's box and they're not going to walk it back, that they're going to approve of this kind of therapy? Um,
it's that's a really interesting question, and I'll start this by saying insurance companies are very clever and smart. Uh, on one side, I saw that uh, early in the pandemic, I've never seen this before, where a commercial by a big insurance company was about mental health. That was the
yeah,
thing they were promoting. They were saying, make sure you take care of your mental health. Now, this is not something insurance companies have done, or that I've seen, and to do this in such a big way. So I think that there's ways that some insurance companies will recognize that people will need support, and maybe they could get more services or help more people, which at the end of the day means more revenue, if they open it up. At the same time, some insurance companies will probably find ways to kind of close it back, right? So, we had a trip scheduled with our family, and yeah, I don't always buy the insurance, but I bought the extra trip insurance, and we ended up deciding to cancel the trip. And because the time that we canceled it, the resort was now going to be open, they won't refund us our money, which was like, okay, that doesn't that doesn't feel good. Then, all right, I'll try the extra travel insurance, and they have a pandemic clause. We we have not seen or experienced a pandemic
but
in
they
at
had
least
already
over
figured out, they had figured out
right. They already have a clause just in case. It might have happened 100 years ago, but they have a clause. So this is my call to action, right, for insurance
Yeah.
companies is revenue obviously is important, and that's a huge part of the pandemic because a lot of people lost revenue and have struggled and lost jobs, and that's an important conversation that we will talk about. At the same time, there's so many more people who need help, who need service, who need to find a therapist, and to not feel like the barrier could be money or could be insurance. So I'm hoping that there won't be a pandemic clause or a tightening back up, but really giving people the freedom to find people virtually and talk to someone wherever they might be.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. And I appreciate that call to action. I hope insurance companies, somebody will listen, somebody will get a hold of our discussion, because I think it's been incredibly gratifying to me also to talk to people who have reached out to therapists and counselors virtually. And that's been important to me. I know that this is your field, but I've been paying attention to people like, what's her name? Cookie from Empire.
Oh, right. Taraji.
Taraji P. Henson had started a whole,
Hmm.
this Black counselors network, trying to reach out to folks to even to continue to encourage the Black community, members of the Black community, to employ their resources, right? And that you can use, virtual services. I'm wondering also, have you seen a difference in your practice and you talking to folks? Have you seen a difference in the kinds of issues that you all were talking about prior to COVID-19 and what you're experiencing now when you're having your meetings with folks?
Yeah, I think a lot of the core issues are the same, and I've been fortunate. I've been doing this work for 19 years. It doesn't seem that long, but
Wow. No, it
but
doesn't.
it is. And I've worked with people from all backgrounds. Different races, ethnicities, even sometimes different languages, different levels of economic wealth or lack of wealth, and some of the core issues still remain the same. And even in those differences, it's really how people engage it. Relationship stuff is still important. Career stuff is still important. Parenting is still important.
Yeah.
These struggles are still there. But I think what COVID-19 has done, and the civil unrest, what that has done is, I think it made, for lack of a better phrase, it took more air out of the room, right? It intensified some of those things that people were already experiencing. So, for instance, you have people who are in families, and somebody loses a job, right? Because due to the COVID and something else that's going on. Now that intensifies everything, their finances, their relationship, and yeah, they're maybe already are on bad terms. And then the civil unrest. I've worked with interracial couple, right? How do they really communicate about these things that maybe they thought they were aligned, and now it kind of pushes some of the pain points to remind them, oh, we still need to dig a little bit deeper to find how we talk about this. And so I think it has created more anxiety. There's more anger and frustration. There's a lot more of just intensity that I'm seeing with my clients. But the good thing is that more people are willing to talk.
Yeah.
It is coming out. One, as a therapist, I'm trying to make space for that. We can talk about this or not, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And more clients are willing to say, I need to talk about this. I need a place where I can talk about all these challenges and then not be judged and then go about my life.
Yeah. Has your caseload increased? Like, are you finding more people are reaching out to you? Or is it that your existing clients are reaching out more frequently? Like, what's been the trend that you've been seeing over the months?
It's fluctuated. I think initially there were some people who were like, oh, we'll just wait this out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to come in the office, which most people do, and see you
Okay.
there. right? We'll just wait this out. And then like weeks go by and it's like, I don't know if I can wait this out, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to talk. And then some people, I think once again, some people tried the virtual and like, this is great. Let's do this. This works. I don't have to commute. I don't have to worry about traffic, all that, right? I think some other people were like, you know, I still really want to come in. And so I've seen my regular folks either stay or kind of shift up how frequent. But then I've had some new folks who have like, I need to talk to somebody. And the beginning of our relationship has been virtual. And
Yeah.
so I've seen the mix of all of that. I think that there's more conversations about mental health, mental wellness, about seeing a therapist. And I think more people are saying, I'm willing to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, so, I know that you are a husband and you are a father of two young kids,
Yes.
and you have a practice, right? You have a private practice. You also work with us at Villanova. So you have been working with us with students. You've been incredibly helpful on Villanova's campus. I know because I send students to you and your calendar stays booked up. You are a busy man. We see you on the Today Show. That's one of my, excitements when I turn on the Today Show, which is one of my favorite things to do in the morning, and I see your face. So you are a busy guy. And so these areas that we're going to be talking about in our subsequent conversations, this question about parenting and work-life balance and the relationship with your lovely wife, and all of this stuff hits you. And so I just want to ask you like a really simple question. How are you? How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You know, what we will talk about is both professional and personal for me. And, uh, you know, to the point that you shared earlier, I find this space actually, um, it's been empowering for me. It's allowed me, you know, things that I learned in class with you and many of my professors that I've loved, that I still love from Villanova, about what is my agency, what is my power, what is my privilege, even. And I think back, in particular with the civil unrest, I think back about 5 years ago, there's a lot that was going on. And in my life personally, I was seeing lots of Black men and Black women die. I was seeing racial injustice, but I was finishing up my doctoral program.
Yeah.
And so I had to do that. I also had to work outside of that. I had two children and my parents were sick. And so it was
Oh,
overwhelming.
yeah.
And I didn't fully find support from my colleagues to ask me that question, how are you doing? And so now I am that much more determined to reach out to other people to make sure that they are okay, especially people of color in the work that I do. I've also been fortunate to still keep, uh, as they say, the lights on during COVID. I've still been able to do the work, and so that's been good. The blessing, though, has been I don't have to miss as many moments with my family. All right,
Yeah.
we've had lunches together, like without going
Like
on
who gets to
vacation.
do that?
Right,
Right. Right.
lunches. I'm not even talking about dinner. Like this is lunch,
Right.
middle of the day. All right,
Yeah.
we've played soccer. We've done other things outside. We've
Fun.
tried to engage in more family activity, and yeah, it is still a balance. And yeah, there's still some tough times that pull on my heart where like my kids will be like, "You have another appointment?" I'm like, "Yeah," right, right, like, and I still feel it, but I also can remember that. Well, I get to just go back upstairs or and spend time with them. So I feel like I've felt the anxiety, I've felt the anger, I've felt the sadness, but I've also felt the empowerment. I've also felt like I'm doing something that I couldn't do before or in a bigger way. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm making an impact, and I feel like this is part of what God has given me with my talents, my ability, my knowledge to really be able to help people. So it is, even in this really dark, challenging, difficult time, I've been able to feel like I can provide some light, and that's been really meaningful for me.
That's really good to hear. I mean, in some ways what you're telling us is that kind of like you're the doctor taking your own medicine, right? I mean, just like listening to um you talk about having lunch in the middle of the day. I mean, that's phenomenal. Because I have to say, and we'll talk about this more when we have our conversation about work-life balance. I have moments where I go all day and I haven't eaten, which
Right.
is like really when you think about it is nuts that you're sitting in your own house and
Right.
you're like not getting up to go to the bathroom, not eating your lunch. I mean, like, okay, you're in control of your day, presumably you're in control. So it's really good to hear that you're being really thoughtful and conscious. And I'm sure as we get more into what what we want to talk about.
And I'll be honest, I'm not saying that I do that every day. So there are days where I am working all day and the only break is the bathroom break or if somebody cancels. It's like,
Yeah,
woo, they
yeah,
canceled. I can go eat.
right.
So I want to be clear that there are times the self-care meter is off.
Is
And,
off.
I felt it maybe about a few weeks ago. And I realized I was just tired and
Yeah,
I was looking forward to the weekend and doing nothing.
yeah,
And so when we talk about the work-life balance, it's going to be a lot of paying attention to those signs. And the
yeah.
thing that I would normally do, I can't do. I would travel. I would,
Right.
every so often I would go somewhere, but I can't. So I need to
Yeah.
figure something else out. I will be honest. I am not perfect, and while there are lots of ways I could course correct. So I will share that as well.
Last night, my day went so long. I don't think I was finished till almost 10 o'clock at night. And when I came into our bedroom and I said to my husband, I was pouting. I said, I haven't even eaten dinner. He said, go get your dinner, bring it upstairs. And he was trying to stay awake to talk to me.
Oh,
Just one of those, it was just one
yeah.
of those days. There's things that pop up, there's all kinds of issues, but I'm really excited about our next upcoming conversations. We're going to when we come back or when we talk again, we're going to talk about relationships because like my sweet husband stayed awake yesterday to talk to me, but all day he was working and I was working. And so I think that's one we're gonna jump back into it and we're gonna talk about relationships because there's all kinds of relationships that
Yes.
I think we have to tend to. So I think we're off to a great start. I am super, super excited about this. I'm gonna pick your brain, so get ready. And I know all of our Villanova community and everyone that gets access to this is going to really benefit from it. So thanks for spending this time with me. And we'll get together soon, have another conversation, okay?
Thank you so much. I'm excited, and once again, this is just a pure joy for me, and to be able to talk about these things and the things that we're going to dig deep into. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.